Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong simply because of the color of your skin? Imagine sitting in first class, calm and polite, only to have your request for a simple glass of water denied, not because they couldn't serve you, but because they couldn't see you. What would you do? Stay quiet to keep the peace, or stand up and risk being misunderstood? When Dr. Marcus Ellington, a respected black CEO, boarded that flight, he thought it would be another ordinary trip. But in the space of one quiet moment between a request and a refusal, his dignity was tested, and the truth about an entire system began to unravel. This isn't just a story about an airline. It's a story about how silence can hurt, how courage can heal, and how one man's calm demand for respect shook an entire industry. If you were him, would you have spoken up or let it slide again? Stay with me, because what happened next will challenge everything you believe about justice, empathy, and the power of quiet strength. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your voice helps stories like this one take flight. The morning air at Denver International carried a quiet chill, the kind that wakes you up better than coffee ever could. Overhead, a woman's voice announced boarding for NorthSky Airlines Flight 722 to New York. The concourse lights reflected on polished floors, and people hurried past, dragging suitcases that hummed like bees. Dr. Marcus Ellington walked among them, a tall man in a charcoal coat and calm eyes. At 45, he carried the stillness of someone who had learned to breathe through storms. He looked, to most, like any traveler heading to a business meeting. No one guessed he was the CEO of AeroVantage Systems, the company responsible for NorthSky's entire flight safety network. Marcus didn't like flying first class, but today he needed quiet. Seat 3B aisle had been booked weeks ago by his assistant. He carried a simple leather bag and a worn paperback on leadership he'd been reading for months. As he reached the gate, a group of passengers gathered near the priority lane. A flight attendant checked boarding passes. "Mornin'," Marcus said gently, offering his ticket. The woman looked up. Sophie Lang, 26, perfect hair pinned tight, uniform crisp enough to cut paper. Her eyes flickered down at the ticket, then back to his face. "Sir," she said, voice polite but edged with doubt, "are you sure this is first-class boarding?" Marcus paused, a small, patient smile forming. "Yes, ma'am, 3 Bravo." She scanned it. The green light beeped. Still, her eyebrows stayed raised. "All right, then. Enjoy your flight," she murmured, already turning to the next passenger. Marcus stepped onto the jet bridge. The metallic echo of his footsteps followed him down the tunnel. Inside the cabin, soft jazz played. The scent of brewed coffee and disinfectant hung in the air. He placed his bag above his seat and sat down, smoothing the crease of his sleeve. Across the aisle, a couple in matching sweaters chatted cheerfully. Another man scrolled through emails, normal, ordinary, peaceful, yet something in the air felt off and undercurrent. He caught Sophie glancing his way as she poured champagne for the couple in 3A and 3C. When their glasses clinked, she smiled wide. When Marcus nodded politely at her, her expression stiffened. He ignored it at first. Years had taught him which battles were worth fighting. A few minutes later, he pressed the service button. Sophie approached, tray in hand. "Could I have some water, please?" Marcus asked softly. Her tone flattened. "We'll be serving beverages after takeoff, sir." "That's fine," he said. "Just water, if possible." She hesitated. "We're out up here. Maybe after we level off." Her words were quick, rehearsed. She turned and walked away before he could reply. Marcus looked down at his hands, then out the window. Snow clouds drifted over the Rockies. His reflection in the glass looked calm, but his chest felt tight. A simple request denied. Again. He took a slow breath, counting to 5. The engines hummed louder. Flight attendants secured carts. Seat belts clicked. He tried to focus on his book, but the words blurred. When the wheels lifted, he felt the familiar, weightless pull. A whisper inside him said, "Let it go. Not worth it." Another voice, older, sharper, whispered back, "You've let it go too many times." As the plane climbed through sunlight, Marcus adjusted his cufflink, closed the book, and stared ahead. The flight had barely begun, and already something in his gut told him this trip would not end quietly. The aircraft steadied above the clouds, the hum of engines blending with the faint jazz still whispering through the speakers. The seatbelt sign dimmed, and passengers began to relax. Marcus leaned back, trying to shake the slight sting of Sophie's earlier words. It was just water, he told himself. Don't make it bigger than it is. But small things had weight, and silence was one of them. He opened his book again, eyes drifting over the same paragraph. The pages blurred into the soft reflection of the cabin lights. Around him, the other passengers chatted or ordered drinks. Sophie moved down the aisle, her smile perfectly timed, her tone pleasant. The man beside Marcus asked for sparkling water. She poured it, condensation glistening on the glass, her laugh crisp and easy. Then she turned and met Marcus's eyes for a second. A flicker. A wall. He waited, just long enough for her to acknowledge him, but she didn't. She passed to the next row as if he were invisible. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Sophie didn't turn. The man next to him looked over, puzzled. "You good? I'm fine," Marcus answered, voice measured. He wasn't fine, but he was practiced at pretending. A few minutes later, another attendant appeared, Tara Nguyen, petite, calm, her badge glinting under the cabin light. She began serving coffee down the opposite aisle. Marcus caught her attention with a nod. "Could I have a bottle of water, please?" he asked. Tara smiled. "Of course, sir." She opened the cart, reached for a bottle, and began to twist the cap. Then Sophie's voice cut through the aisle. "Tara, we're short up here," she said sharply. "Water's for service only." Tara froze mid-motion. Her eyes flicked between them, uncertain. "I didn't realize," she murmured. "It's fine," Marcus said gently. "Don't worry about it." Tara gave him an apologetic look, setting the bottle back into the cart before moving on. Sophie walked past soon after, avoiding his gaze entirely. Marcus exhaled, long and quiet. There it was again, the subtle push to the edges, the quiet reminder that some people still didn't belong. He thought of his father, a postal worker in Alabama who'd once been told to use the back door of a diner because the front was for customers. His father had come home silent that night, carrying the same kind of ache Marcus now felt in his chest. He pulled out his phone, not to record, but to distract himself, emails, reports, project updates. Yet every word on the screen dissolved into the same question that had followed him for years. When does dignity become negotiable across the aisle? Elena Brooks, a journalist with the Denver Tribune, noticed the tension. She'd seen the exchange earlier, and her instincts buzzed. She opened her notebook, jotting quick observations, attendant refuses water, passenger calm. Subtext strong. She wasn't sure what the story was yet, but she could feel it forming like a storm on the horizon. The seatbelt sign blinked on again as the plane hit a pocket of turbulence. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. Sophie used the moment to collect trash, her steps brisk. When she reached Marcus's row, he handed her an empty napkin from the welcome drink he'd never received. "Thank you," he said simply. Something in his tone, steady but low, made her glance at him longer than before. For the first time, she seemed to notice the quiet restraint in his eyes. She turned away quickly, moving down the aisle. Marcus stared out the window once more. The clouds rolled like endless white plains below. He thought about how easily politeness could be used as armor, how discrimination didn't always shout it whispered, smiled, and called itself procedure. His throat felt dry. The irony stung. He pressed the service button again. Seconds later, Sophie returned, her expression rehearsed. "Yes, sir, I was just wondering," Marcus said, his voice calm but deeper now. "If there's a policy against giving a passenger water before meal service," her eyes narrowed. "Policies are in place for consistency." "Sir, I understand that," he said, "but I've been watching you serve several others." A few passengers nearby shifted in their seats. The couple across the aisle exchanged glances. Sophie's cheeks flushed slightly. "Sir, I'm following standard service flow. Please don't make this uncomfortable." "I'm not," Marcus replied. "I'm asking for clarity." Her lips tightened. "We'll handle your request later, after the cabin's settled." He gave a slow nod. "All right." When she walked away, the silence around him thickened. Tara looked over from the galley, her brow creased. Marcus gave a small shake of his head, signaling that it was fine. But it wasn't. He tried to focus on the rhythm of the engines, on the thin line between patience and surrender. Inside, a quiet dialogue unfolded. If you say something, they'll call it overreaction. If you stay silent, you'll regret it. He wasn't sure which wound cut deeper, the one inflicted by others, or the one you gave yourself by pretending not to feel it. About 20 minutes passed. The smell of reheated eggs and coffee filled the air. Sophie returned, smiling now as if nothing had happened. "Breakfast?" she asked. "No, thank you," Marcus said. "Something to drink." Then her tone almost dared him to answer. He looked up at her, voice level. "Water will do." She hesitated again, eyes darting toward the galley. For a long second, it seemed she might refuse. Then she nodded curtly, poured a half glass from a pitcher, and set it on his tray. The glass trembled slightly with the motion of the plane. He took it, offered a faint smile. "Thank you." She didn't reply. As she walked off, Marcus sipped slowly. The water was lukewarm, metallic, but he drank it anyway. It wasn't about thirst anymore. It was about the small, silent proof that some walls still stood high in places that claimed to be equal. Olena, still watching, closed her notebook. Her journalist's instinct told her something was brewing. She took out her phone, checking the battery, just in case. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, scattering golden light across the wing. Marcus felt it brush his face, warm and steady. He whispered to himself, almost inaudible, "Don't let them take your peace." But beneath the calm, something in him had shifted, a quiet resolve hardening like steel under silk. He didn't yet know that this flight, this moment with a half glass of water, would ripple far beyond 30,000 feet. For now, he just watched the light fade across the clouds, the taste of metal still lingering on his tongue, and waited. The aircraft glided steady at 35,000 feet. The sky outside stretched endlessly blue, and the cabin lights were dimmed to a gentle gold. Passengers slept or scrolled through their phones. The hush between engine hums broken only by the faint click of seat belts and soft conversation. Yet, beneath the quiet, tension pulsed like an undercurrent. Marcus hadn't touched his book again. The half-empty glass of water sat on the tray table, its surface trembling with each minor shake of turbulence. He kept looking at it, the reflection of light shimmering on the surface like something fragile that might spill at any moment. Sophie passed by twice without looking at him. She moved with polished rhythm, hair still neat, uniform flawless, but there was something new in her motion rigidity, a self-conscious effort to act unbothered. Tara noticed it. She had been watching since breakfast, sensing a shift she couldn't ignore. Tara finally stopped by Marcus's row. Her voice was quiet. "Sir, is everything all right?" He looked up. Her tone wasn't rehearsed. It carried genuine concern. "I'm fine," he said. "Thank you for asking." But Tara didn't move away. "I noticed earlier about the water. I just want you to know. That's not how we're supposed to handle service." Marcus studied her, a slight nod of appreciation. "I understand. Not your fault." Her eyes softened. "Still, I'm sorry." That word sorry landed gently, almost easing the edge that had been grinding inside him all morning. "Thank you, Miss Nguyen," he said. "You have a good heart. Don't lose it." Tara smiled faintly and continued her duties. Sophie, watching from the galley, caught the moment and felt irritation coil in her stomach. She couldn't explain why, only that something about the man's calm composure unsettled her. She told herself it was about protocol, about efficiency, but deep down, a flicker of resentment burned at being silently judged. As she poured coffee for another row, Elena Brooks discreetly raised her phone, pretending to check messages but recording the tension unfolding in the cabin. The journalist in her sensed a narrative bigger than a drink, an invisible line of dignity crossed and denied. Minutes later, a soft chime announced light turbulence. The plane dipped slightly and cups rattled. Sophie steadied the service cart near Marcus's seat. The movement caused the glass of water on his tray to tip, spilling across his sleeve. He flinched slightly, then reached for a napkin. Before he could wipe it, Sophie said quickly, "Sir, please be careful. That's why we don't hand out drinks early." The words were coated in artificial politeness, but the tone carried accusation. Heads turned. Tara froze midway through her aisle. Marcus dabbed his sleeve, patient as ever. "I see," he said softly. "Then I suppose it's my fault for asking." The quiet that followed was heavy. Elena's camera stayed steady, the recording light blinking like a silent witness. The turbulence eased. Sophie pushed the cart forward, cheeks flushed, her chest felt tight, her own heartbeat loud in her ears. She wasn't sure why the exchange left her shaken. Something about his restraint, his refusal to rise to her tone made her feel exposed. Marcus leaned back again, his mind drifting through memories he'd tried to bury. He remembered sitting in a waiting room years ago, freshly graduated, suit pressed, resume perfect. The receptionist had asked him if he was delivering mail. He'd smiled then, too, swallowing the sting. He'd learned early that silence could be survival, but silence also left scars no one saw. Now, as the engines droned on, he realized he'd spent a lifetime choosing peace over confrontation. Maybe today, peace was no longer enough. Coffee. Sartar's voice brought him back. "No, thank you," he said. "Just water if it's allowed." She hesitated, then poured a small cup anyway, setting it down discreetly. "Allowed or not," she whispered, "it's the right thing." He looked at her, gratitude flickering in his eyes. "You remind me of my daughter," he said. Same courage. Tara smiled, then quickly moved on before Sophie could see. But Sophie had seen, and for the first time, guilt pricked at the back of her mind. The flight carried on uneventfully for a while. The lights dimmed for rest service. Marcus tried to sleep, but the rhythmic pulse of the engines only amplified his thoughts. He replayed each moment, the tone, the glances, the half-smile of dismissal. It wasn't just about the glass of water. It was the echo of every quiet indignity that men like him were expected to bear gracefully. In the galley, Sophie leaned against the counter, staring at her reflection in the metal coffee pot. Tara walked in to restock cups. The silence between them was thick. "You embarrassed me out there," Sophie said finally. Tara blinked. "For giving a man water, for questioning me in front of passengers." "I wasn't questioning," Tara replied evenly. "I was doing what's right." Sophie crossed her arms. "You don't know what's right. You've been here 6 months, and you've been here 3 years," Tara said, her voice steady but firm, long enough to forget what kindness looks like. Sophie's jaw tightened. "Watch your tone. I could say the same." Tara turned and walked away, leaving Sophie staring at her own reflection again. Heat rising behind her eyes. She felt cornered, but she couldn't tell if the pressure came from outside or within. Back in first class, Elena quietly reviewed her footage. The man's dignity, the attendant's defensiveness. It was a mirror of every hidden bias she'd covered in her career. She hesitated, thumb hovering over save. Was it ethical to record without consent? She told herself she'd decide later. But part of her already knew this story deserved light. Hours passed. The plane began its slow descent toward New York. Cabin lights brightened. People stretched, checked watches, prepared for landing. Marcus closed his book at last, untouched pages mocking his attempt at peace. As the seatbelt sign chimed again, Sophie approached for final checks. She stopped at his row, posture stiff, eyes carefully neutral. "Thank you for flying with us, sir," she said. Her tone was professional, yet beneath it was the faintest tremor. Marcus met her gaze. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. "I appreciate the service," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "I hope your company values fairness as much as it values courtesy." Her throat tightened. She nodded without speaking, moving down the aisle quickly. Tara followed a few rows behind, her glance soft as she passed. "Safe landing, Dr. Ellington." He smiled, just slightly. "Thank you, Tara." Outside, the skyline of New York came into view, silver and glowing through morning haze. The city waited below, loud, merciless, alive. Marcus fastened his seatbelt, steady hands hiding the storm building inside. He didn't know yet that by the time this plane touched down, his quiet endurance would no longer be private, and that a simple glass of water would soon ignite a national conversation about dignity at 35,000 feet. The plane began its descent into New York's morning haze. slicing through clouds like silver through silk. The city glimmered below, rivers catching sunlight like strands of glass. The announcement crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly at JFK International Airport. Please fasten your seatbelts." Marcus adjusted his belt, eyes fixed on the window. His reflection looked calm, but his pulse told a different story. The quiet exchange with Sophie still burned in his mind, the tone, the dismissal, the weight of being made to feel less in a space he helped build. He had spent years ensuring airlines under AeroVantage's safety system upheld integrity and respect. Yet here he was, humiliated over something as basic as water. When the plane touched down, applause rippled through the cabin, a tradition Marcus never quite understood. As the engine slowed, he exhaled, gathering his things deliberately, waiting for the crowd to thin. Passengers stood, stretching and chatting, their lives moving forward effortlessly, but Marcus could feel eyes on him, Tara's warm and concerned, and Sophie's cold, restless, unreadable. Elena Brooks, the journalist, checked her phone. She uploaded a short, silent clip from the flight, just a few seconds of Sophie refusing Marcus water while serving another passenger across the aisle. She hadn't added commentary, only a caption. When courtesy depends on color, within minutes, her phone buzzed with notifications. She hadn't expected it to explode so quickly as passengers filed out. Sophie stationed herself near the exit, offering mechanical smiles. When Marcus reached her, she spoke softly, almost perfunctory. "Thank you for flying with NorthSky, sir." He looked at her, voice low. "I hope someday you'll understand what that means." Her breath caught, but she didn't answer. He nodded at Tara as he stepped off. "Take care, Ms. Nguyen. You too. Dr. Ellington," she said. Once in the terminal, Marcus walked toward baggage claim, phone vibrating in his pocket. Dozens of messages flashed across the screen, colleagues, family, even reporters. Confusion rippled through him until he saw the thumbnail, his own face, blurred slightly in the video. Sophie's profile sharp against the cabin light. The video already had 50,000 views. He froze in the middle of the concourse. People bustled around, dragging luggage, laughing into phones, unaware that the man standing still among them was about to be at the center of a storm. He clicked the video. The comments flooded faster than he could read. Words like racism, humiliation, dignity, and hashtags multiplying by the minute. A familiar name flashed on his caller ID, Naomi Kent, AeroVantage's communications director. "Marcus," she said before he could speak. "It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, CNN's already reaching out for statements." He rubbed his forehead. "That fast, viral fast," Naomi said grimly. "It's not just about the flight. People are sharing their own stories, discrimination, travel bias. You're trending under water denied." He closed his eyes, half in disbelief, half in resignation. "I didn't want this." "I know," she replied, "but it's here, and the board's calling an emergency meeting this afternoon. They want you in Atlanta immediately." Marcus agreed, though his voice was weary. "Book me on the next flight. I'll handle this myself." He hung up and stood silently for a moment, watching the scrolling departure screens. People passed by without knowing they brushed shoulders with the man whose quiet ordeal had already sparked a national debate. Across the terminal, Sophie sat in the staff area, still in uniform, scrolling through her own phone. The video glared back at her, her own face frozen mid-sentence, refusing a passenger's request. The caption stabbed at her pride. She turned the volume down. But the noise was internal now, a rush of fear, shame, disbelief. Her supervisor, Chief Purser Angela Rhodes, entered the room. Lang, what happened on that flight? Sophie swallowed hard. It was nothing. A misunderstanding. Angela crossed her arms. It's not nothing. Corporate called me before you landed. They've launched an internal review. Your name's all over social media. Sophie's hands trembled. I didn't mean anything by it. Angela's voice softened slightly. Intentions don't always matter when impact speaks louder. Back in the main terminal, Tara watched from a distance as Sophie was escorted into an office. Her stomach churned. She'd wanted accountability, but not like this. Not public humiliation. Still, she couldn't shake the image of Marcus's quiet composure. That kind of grace didn't come from weakness. It came from years of surviving in spaces that questioned your right to exist there. Outside, cameras already gathered. Reporters wanted statements, pictures, reactions. One of them recognized Marcus and approached. Dr. Ellington, sir, is it true you were refused service on a NorthSky flight? He paused. The world seemed to hold its breath. Yes, he said finally, but this isn't about me. It's about how small acts of bias, left unchecked, become culture. The journalist scribbled furiously. Do you intend to take action? Marcus met his gaze. Action isn't about revenge, it's about responsibility. For all of us. He walked past them, the cameras clicking like rain against concrete. By the time he reached his hotel, the story had grown teeth. Networks were running headlines. Black executive humiliated at 30,000 feet. Talk shows debated whether it was an overreaction or a symptom of something deeper. Former employees came forward with similar claims. Naomi called again that evening. We've arranged transport to HQ tomorrow morning. The CEO wants you to lead the response. NorthSky's scrambling, they've issued a preliminary apology. Marcus stared out the window, the skyline glowing under a bruised dusk. They'll need more than words. That's why they need you, Naomi said. You've been preaching reform for years. Now you have the platform. After the call, he sank into the chair, exhaustion heavy in his bones. He thought of his father again, of the quiet dignity that had been both armor and burden. He wondered what his father would have said now. Don't let anger make you small. Let truth make you bigger. Meanwhile, in her small apartment in Queens, Sophie scrolled through endless comments, some cruel, some righteous, all loud. She read words like fire her, racist witch, no mercy. Each one struck like a pebble against glass. She threw the phone onto the couch, heart racing. Her roommate, Claire Monroe, looked up. What did you do? Soph, I didn't do anything wrong. Sophie snapped, voice cracking. It was just water, a stupid cup of water. Claire hesitated. Maybe it's not about the water. Sophie didn't answer. She sat there, staring at her reflection in the black TV screen. Her face pale and small under the dim light. Somewhere across the city. Elena Brooks drafted an article she hadn't yet decided to publish. Her editor wanted a headline that burned, but she wanted a story that healed. Her notes filled the page grace under humiliation, the calm that breaks walls. She knew she was holding more than a viral clip, she was holding a mirror. By midnight, Water Denied had reached 5 million views. Airlines across the country released statements promising investigations. Activists quoted Marcus's line about responsibility. And in homes, airports, and offices. People were arguing not just about service, but about equality. As Marcus finally turned off the lights, the hum of the city outside sounded almost like the steady thrum of an engine, pushing forward into uncertain air. The storm had begun, and he was at its center not by choice, but by conviction. He whispered to the dark, "Maybe this time, something will change." The next morning arrived gray and restless over Manhattan, the sky heavy with mist. From his hotel window, Marcus watched the city stirring awake taxis flashing their yellow veins through the drizzle, pedestrians clutching coffee cups like shields. He had always loved mornings in New York, but not this one. This one felt like the pause before a verdict. His phone buzzed again, its vibration constant since dawn. News outlets requested interviews, advocacy groups wanted partnerships, and the Aero Vantage Board wanted answers. He ignored most of them, scrolling through his inbox until one subject line stopped him: NorthSky Emergency Response Meeting, 10:00 a.m. Naomi Kent had already texted him the address of the airline's corporate tower near LaGuardia. He closed the curtains, straightened his tie, and whispered to himself, "Stay grounded, Marcus." When his car pulled up to the building, protesters were already gathered outside. They held signs reading, "Respect is not optional," and "Service without bias." Cameras flashed as he stepped out, and questions flew like sharp wind. "Dr. Ellington, are you pressing charges? Will Aero Vantage end its contracts with NorthSky?" He didn't respond. Silence, this time, was strategy. Inside the glass tower, the tension was dense enough to touch. Executives in dark suits moved briskly through the lobby, whispering to one another. Marcus's escort led him to the 15th floor conference room where Daniel Pierce, NorthSky's chairman, was already waiting. The man rose as Marcus entered, extending a hand. "Dr. Ellington," Daniel began, tone heavy with formality, "thank you for coming on such short notice. You've had quite a week." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "So has your airline." Daniel gave a dry nod. "I won't pretend we haven't failed here. The video is everywhere. Our PR team can't contain it, but I'd rather fix the cause than the optics." "That's a start," Marcus said. Around the table sat NorthSky's top brass Janet Fields, head of HR, Miles Drayton, legal counsel, and Angela Rhodes, the chief purser who had already reprimanded Sophie. On a side screen, Sophie's file was projected: clean service record, positive reviews, no prior incidents. Daniel continued, "We've suspended Ms. Lang pending investigation. She's expressed remorse and claims it was a misunderstanding, not discrimination." Marcus folded his hands. Intent doesn't erase impact, especially when the pattern is larger than one person. Janet leaned forward. "We understand, but we also want to ensure fairness to our staff." Marcus met her gaze. Fairness should be a habit, not an afterthought. A long silence stretched across the table. The hum of air conditioning filled it. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "Dr. Ellington, what would you suggest we do?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window, the city's skyline half swallowed by fog. "You need to change the culture that allows this to happen. Training isn't enough. Accountability needs structure." Janet interjected, "We already have diversity training. Then make it mean something." He interrupted gently but firmly. "Tie it to evaluations, promotions, bonuses. If respect isn't measurable, it isn't real." The room stilled. Daniel scribbled notes, nodding slowly, When the meeting adjourned an hour later, Marcus remained behind. Angela approached him quietly. "Dr. Ellington, I wanted to say I'm sorry for what you experienced. I was Sophie's supervisor on that route. I failed to catch it." "You didn't fail," Marcus said. "The system did." Angela's eyes glistened. "She's young. Maybe this will wake her up." Marcus nodded, unsure if he believed it yet. As he stepped out of the building, reporters surged forward again. This time, he paused. "There's a tendency," he said to the cameras, "to treat moments like this as scandal, but they're lessons. Let's not waste this one." By evening, clips of his words aired nationwide. News anchors quoted him. Op-ed writers called him the voice of measured justice. The calm in his tone contrasted the fury online, and that calm only amplified his power. Across town. Sophie sat in the NorthSky HR office, her uniform replaced by a plain sweater. Her hands twisted in her lap as Janet Fields entered with a folder. "We've concluded the preliminary review," Janet said. "The footage is clear, and several passengers corroborated what happened. You'll be placed on unpaid suspension pending final decision." Sophie swallowed hard. "So that's it." Janet sighed. "You can submit a written statement. But Sophie, this isn't just about you. It's about what you represent now." When Janet left, Sophie's composure cracked. She covered her face, tears slipping between her fingers. Claire had told her to stay off the internet. But curiosity had won. She'd read the comments calling her every name imaginable. Her career, her reputation, everything she'd built was crumbling because of a moment she couldn't take back. But beneath the panic was something new, understanding. For the first time, she realized how easily she had dismissed another human being. She remembered the way Marcus looked at her, not angry, just disappointed, as if seeing an old wound reopen before his eyes. That look haunted her more than the headlines. Meanwhile, Tara Nguyen sat in a cafe near her apartment, scrolling through articles about the incident. She'd been called a hero online for stepping in, though she hadn't done much. She wasn't proud. She was conflicted. She thought about Sophie, how fear and ignorance could twist good people into harmful ones. And she thought about Marcus, wondering how many times he'd had to swallow pain before this flight. That night, Marcus returned to his apartment overlooking Central Park. Naomi was there waiting, laptop open, surrounded by folders. "It's official," she said. "NorthSky wants to partner with AeroVantage on a joint inclusion initiative. They're offering you full authority to design it." Marcus blinked. "You're serious." "Completely. They want to call it the Compass Program, a new ethics standard for all cabin crew based on equity metrics. They want you to announce it with them next week." He sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "I didn't want fame from this." "Naomi, you didn't get fame," she said softly. "You earned credibility." He looked up at her, and Sophie Lang, still suspended. Naomi said, "There's public pressure to fire her, but it's your call whether you push for that or not." Marcus didn't answer right away. The easy path was punishment. The harder one was perspective. He stood, walked to the window, and stared at the city glowing beneath low clouds. Somewhere out there, the young woman who had denied him a basic courtesy was likely sitting in darkness, wondering how her life had unraveled. He didn't want revenge. He wanted understanding. "I'll think about it," he said finally. Later that night, while the world online argued about justice and race and airline policies, Marcus sat alone with a notebook. On a blank page, He wrote 3 words, "Dignity requires action." He didn't yet know what form that action would take. But for the first time since the flight, he felt purpose instead of anger. And far across the city, Sophie drafted an apology letter she couldn't bring herself to send. The words started and stopped. I didn't realize. I didn't mean, "I'm sorry," but each attempt felt smaller than the damage done. The rain eased near midnight. New York's lights shimmered like scattered stars. The storm outside was ending, but the one inside each of them was only beginning to take shape, a storm that, in its destruction, might finally clear the air. The morning of the NorthSky press conference arrived with a strange quiet that felt heavier than noise. Marcus stood before the mirror in his suite, straightening his tie. Outside, the sky was an icy blue streaked with thin clouds that looked almost painted on. The city seemed to hold its breath. His reflection stared back, calm, composed, but older somehow. The past week had stripped something from him and replaced it with clarity. On the desk behind him, his phone vibrated with constant notifications. Naomi's voice came through the door. "They're ready downstairs. Media's everywhere. You sure you want to walk into this yourself?" He nodded. "If I hide, I lose the message." They exited together, the elevator ride silent except for the low hum of cables. In the lobby, security guided them through a corridor to the waiting car. Protesters lined the street again, but this time their signs carried messages of hope as much as outrage, justice through grace, and let voices rise. Cameras flashed as Marcus walked out, his posture steady, coat catching the wind. The conference was held in a high-rise auditorium owned jointly by Aero Vantage and NorthSky. Dozens of reporters filled the front rows, microphones poised. Behind the podium, banners read "The Compass Initiative, Human First, Always." Daniel Pierce stood at the edge of the stage, his expression both anxious and grateful. Naomi handed Marcus his speech, but he didn't take it. He planned to speak from memory and from heart. Daniel began first, his voice formal. Today marks a step toward reflection and reform. What began as a single incident has become a reminder that systems built by humans can fail when humanity is forgotten. We're here to rebuild that trust. He gestured for Marcus to join him. The murmuring crowd quieted. Marcus stepped up, scanning the room. Faces blurred into a sea of anticipation. For a moment, he thought of his father again, of that diner door so many years ago. Then he began. "When people talk about discrimination," he said slowly, "they imagine explosions, shouting, insults, violence, but more often it's a whisper, a pause, a refusal. Something small enough to deny, but big enough to break the spirit." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This isn't a campaign about bad apples. It's about invisible walls policies and habits that separate us even when we think we're doing nothing wrong. The goal of the Compass Initiative is simple: to make empathy measurable. Because in the air, or anywhere, safety is not just mechanical, it's moral." Flashes lit the stage like lightning. Naomi watched from the side, pride softening her face. Marcus concluded, "To every passenger who's ever felt unseen, this is for you. And to every worker who fears speaking up, your courage is the start of change." Applause broke out, first cautious, then thunderous. Daniel shook his hand firmly. Reporters shouted questions, but Marcus stepped away from the microphones, exhaustion settling over him like gravity. Later, in the private lounge, Daniel joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "You did good out there," he said. Let's see if good can outlast the headlines." Marcus replied with a faint smile. Daniel hesitated, then said, "We've reviewed Sophie Lang's final statement. She's asked to meet with you privately, if you'll agree." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "She wants to meet me. She insists, says it's not for publicity." He considered this for a long moment. "All right," he said finally. "Set it up." The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon at a small conference room inside NorthSky's downtown office. No cameras, no reporters, just two people separated by silence and circumstance. When Marcus arrived, Sophie was already there, her posture uncertain, hands clasped tightly. She looked smaller without the uniform, more human. The defiance he'd seen on the plane was gone. In its place was something raw fear, perhaps, or regret. "Dr. Ellington," she began quietly, "thank you for agreeing to see me." He nodded, settling into the chair across from her. "You wanted to talk." She swallowed hard. "I know you don't owe me anything, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know I didn't see you that day, not as who you are, or even as a man, just another passenger, another complaint to manage. I've been on edge for months. Long shifts, rude travelers. I thought I was being firm, but I was being cruel." Marcus listened in silence, expression unreadable. "I grew up in a small town," she continued, eyes lowering. "We didn't have people who looked like you around much. I guess I carried that ignorance without even realizing it. When you asked for water, I heard arrogance instead of a simple need. I heard what I was taught to hear." She paused, her voice trembling. "When I saw that video, I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. The worst part wasn't the comments, it was your face. You didn't even raise your voice. You just looked tired. And I made you feel that again." Marcus finally spoke, his tone low but steady. "You didn't make me feel it. You reminded me of it." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." He leaned back, studying her. "What do you want from me?" "Sophie." "Not redemption," she whispered. "Just the chance to do something right for once, for the first time." Marcus saw sincerity beneath the wreckage. He thought about all the people who had wronged him in smaller ways over the years, the thousands of times he'd let it slide because speaking up cost too much peace. Maybe this moment was what the word change really meant. Not just public reform, but private reckoning. He said softly, "You can start by staying in the program. The Compass Initiative will need voices like yours, people who've seen both sides of this." Her head jerked up. "You'd want me involved. After all this, I don't need you to be perfect," he said. "I need you to be proof." Sophie pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. For the first time in days, she exhaled without shaking. "Thank you, Dr. Ellington. I won't waste it. Don't thank me," he replied. "Thank the lesson." After she left, Marcus sat alone in the quiet room. Outside, the city hummed with motion, the world moving forward like it always did, but something inside him settled a peace different from the silence he used to choose. This peace came from action, from knowing the storm had been worth it. Later that evening, Naomi called to brief him on the rollout plan. "The Compass Initiative launches next month," she said, "and Sophie's agreed to participate in testimonial training. We'll pair her with Nguyen. Poetic, isn't it?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Poetic and necessary." When the call ended, he stepped onto the balcony. The air smelled of rain, clean and electric. Below, traffic lights flickered red and green in rhythmic dance. He thought of how easily life could swing between those same colors, stop and go, fear and courage, guilt and grace. Somewhere out there, Sophie was probably walking home through the drizzle, head down, replaying every word. And maybe, just maybe, she would walk into tomorrow different from who she'd been yesterday. Marcus looked up at the night sky, where planes blinked like distant stars. Human first, he murmured. Always. He didn't see it, but far below, a man holding a protest sign looked up at the same moment, whispering those same words, and though neither knew it, they were part of the same quiet revolution, the kind that starts not with noise, but with listening. Weeks passed. The world moved on, as it always did, but the story of the denied glass of water refused to fade. The hashtag on Human First lingered online, resharing, reshaping, becoming a movement rather than a memory. Airlines across the country began quietly revising their policies, citing service equity protocols. Marcus received messages from strangers' pilots, ground crew, even passengers thanking him for saying what they couldn't. Yet not all voices were kind. Some accused him of exploiting the moment for attention. Others claimed he'd ruined a young woman's life. He read them all, never replied, and kept building the Compass Initiative one piece at a time. On a Friday morning, the first internal training was held in a modest auditorium at NorthSky's headquarters. Rows of employees filled the seats: pilots, flight attendants, customer service agents. Marcus stood at the podium, speaking without notes as always. His voice, low and deliberate, carried over the murmurs. "We're not here to trade guilt for progress," he said. "We're here to understand that dignity is the foundation of safety. You can't fly high when someone beneath you feels small." Tara sat in the front row, listening intently. Sophie sat near the back, hands clasped, nervous but attentive. Their eyes met once during the session. Tara gave a slight nod acknowledgement, not absolution. Sophie nodded back, the gesture small but sincere. After the session ended, Marcus stayed to greet attendees. Many thanked him quietly before leaving. When the crowd thinned, Sophie approached. "I've been assigned to your flight tomorrow," she said hesitantly. "The inaugural Compass flight." They said it was symbolic. Marcus studied her expression. "You're ready for that, I have to be," she said. "It's the only way to prove I learned anything." He gave a small, approving nod. "Then let's make tomorrow count." The next day dawned clear and cold. The Compass flight NorthSky 901 was scheduled from New York to Seattle, with Marcus traveling as an official observer. Media coverage was heavy but controlled. The airline wanted redemption framed, not chaos repeated. As Marcus boarded, he noticed the subtle changes already in place: crew introductions, eye contact, softer tones, water offered before boarding was complete. Small things, but real. Sophie greeted passengers at the door with Tara beside her. Her smile was genuine, though a trace of nerves still clung to her. When Marcus reached her, she spoke evenly. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Ellington. Seat 2A. Correct, yes," he said, his voice calm. "Thank you, Ms. Lang." She blinked at the formality, then smiled faintly. "Enjoy your flight." He took his seat, noting the difference in atmosphere. There was ease now, not tension. Tara moved through the aisle efficiently, offering beverages. When she reached Marcus, he accepted water without hesitation. The glass was cold, clear, perfectly ordinary, and yet it felt monumental. Halfway through the flight, the unexpected struck. A passenger in row 6 began coughing violently, his face pale, body trembling. Panic rippled through the cabin. Tara rushed forward first, activating the emergency call. "We've got a medical issue." Sophie appeared seconds later, calm, overtaking fear. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, crouching beside the man. No response. His wife sobbed quietly, clutching his arm. "He has a heart condition." She stammered. "Please help him." Marcus rose from his seat instinctively. "I'm trained in CPR," he said, stepping forward. Tara moved aside immediately. "Go ahead, doctor." Sophie's hands trembled as she fetched the oxygen kit. Marcus began compressions with practiced rhythm, his voice low but firm. "We need the AED," he said. Sophie opened the case, handing it over. Their eyes met for a brief, steady second. In that moment, their roles reversed, she assisting him trusting her. The cabin was silent except for the steady beep of the defibrillator and the rhythmic thump of chest compressions. Then, a faint gasp. The man's chest rose. Relief broke through the tension like light through cloud. Passengers applauded softly. Some cried. Captain Richard Cole's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be diverting to Chicago for emergency medical assistance. Please remain calm." Marcus sat back, sweat on his brow, heart still racing. Sophie knelt nearby, breathless but composed. "You saved him," she whispered. "We saved him," he corrected. When paramedics boarded in Chicago, the man was stable. His wife clasped Marcus's hands, tears streaming. "Thank you. You brought him back to me." Sophie stood quietly beside them, watching. For the first time since their confrontation, Marcus saw something in her that wasn't guilt. It was grace under pressure, the kind born from redemption. As the plane prepared for departure again, Tara approached Marcus. "That was incredible," she said softly. It felt like everything came full circle. He nodded. Life has a strange way of writing symmetry. Sophie came forward, her tone professional but sincere. "Captain Cole asked if you'd like to make an announcement before we continue. To calm the passengers." Marcus hesitated, then stood. Tara handed him the microphone. He looked down the aisle. Hundreds of eyes waiting. "This morning reminded us of something simple," he said. "No matter who we are, passenger, crew, executive, we share the same air, the same heartbeat, the same need for care. Titles fade at 30,000 feet. Humanity doesn't." Applause filled the cabin. He handed back the microphone, returning to his seat. Tara smiled at him from across the aisle, and Sophie busied herself with the galley. Her movements steady now, lighter somehow. By the time they landed in Seattle, the incident had already reached the news. The story read differently this time. Same flight attendant, same passenger. But this time, she saved a life. The narrative had transformed by courage instead of conflict. In the terminal, reporters waited again, though fewer than before. One shouted, "Dr. Ellington, care to comment on today's event?" He paused at the exit. Tara and Sophie standing behind him. "It's simple," he said. "Growth doesn't erase mistakes. It proves we can rise beyond them." Later, as the sun set behind the Seattle skyline, Marcus sat alone in the quiet of his hotel room, looking out at the orange glow over the Sound. The flight replayed in his mind the panic, the teamwork, the moment Sophie handed him the AED without hesitation. He realized the circle was complete, from denial to trust, from silence to cooperation. His phone buzzed. A text from Naomi read, You just turned a scandal into a standard." He smiled slightly, setting the phone down. He knew it wasn't his doing alone. It was the collective act of people choosing to be better, moment by moment. In another part of the city, Sophie sat in her small hotel room, staring at her reflection. For the first time in months, she didn't feel the ache of shame. Instead, she felt something cleaner relief. She whispered softly, "Human first," the phrase rolling off her tongue like a prayer. Tomorrow would bring more flights, more faces, more moments to test the lessons learned. But tonight, at least, they had landed safely, not just in a city, but in understanding. The morning after the Compass flight, Seattle woke beneath soft rain. The city's skyline shimmered behind a veil of mist, and the world outside Marcus's hotel window seemed quieter than usual, like a long exhale after turbulence. Yet, beneath the calm, he knew something was shifting again. His inbox overflowed with messages from journalists and executives, but also from ordinary travelers sharing stories of kindness and bias, of fear and grace. People had found in the flight not just a headline, but a mirror. By mid-morning, Naomi called. "The press can't get enough of yesterday," she said, voice brisk but bright. "You, Sophie, the passenger, it's being framed as redemption in real time. NorthSky's board wants to build the next phase of the Compass initiative. They're asking you to chair the Ethics Council permanently." Marcus exhaled slowly. "I didn't plan to become the face of reform. No one plans it," she replied, "but you've become the voice people trust. That's rarer than authority." He smiled faintly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "What about Sophie?" "She's been reinstated full-time," Naomi said. "They're putting her in crew mentorship. Some people are criticizing the move, but others see it as progress. She asked if she could send you a message, personal, not public." Marcus paused. "Tell her she can—" Naomi hesitated. "One more thing. The airline wants to host a televised town hall pilots, crew, and executives. They want you to lead it." He looked out the window at the rain sliding down the glass. "That's not a discussion. That's exposure. Sometimes exposure is what light needs," she said gently. The following week, the event was confirmed for New York. They called it the Human First Forum. Hundreds of employees were invited. Cameras would stream it live. Marcus prepared quietly, reviewing notes not on corporate metrics, but on empathy, how to make compassion sound like strategy. Meanwhile, Sophie sat in her apartment in Queens, practicing how to speak without trembling. Every time she rehearsed her lines, her throat tightened. She'd faced passengers, emergencies, even near disasters, but nothing frightened her like this admitting her own failure before the world. Claire, her roommate, watched from the couch. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "Yes, I do," Sophie replied. "If I stay silent now, I'm the same person who looked past him that day." On the day of the forum, the hall pulsed with nervous energy. Rows of uniforms filled the seats, every shade of blue and gray blending under the stage lights. Marcus stood backstage, calm but reflective. Tara greeted him with her usual quiet smile. "You ready as anyone can be before walking into history," he said, half joking. Naomi handed him a microphone. "You're not walking alone. Marcus, remember that." When the lights brightened and the cameras went live, applause filled the room. Daniel Pierce opened with brief remarks, then turned the stage over to Marcus. He began not with speeches, but with silence, a full 10 seconds that stretched long enough to make the crowd lean forward. "When we talk about bias, he said finally. "We talk about others, rarely about ourselves, but real change starts when the mirror feels uncomfortable." He spoke of the compass flight, of small acts building trust, of dignity as infrastructure. His words flowed like water, steady, patient, precise. Every sentence carried warmth beneath the authority. Then he gestured toward the side stage. "Some lessons are more powerful when shared. Ms. Sophie Lang, would you join me?" the audience murmured as she walked on stage, heart pounding. She stopped beside him, palms damp. Marcus gave her a reassuring nod. She faced the crowd, voice low but unwavering. "A few months ago, I refused a passenger something as simple as water. I told myself it was procedure. The truth is, it was pride and prejudice wearing a uniform." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed closer. "I didn't understand what I'd done until I saw myself through the eyes of the person I hurt. Since then, I've learned something I wish I'd known sooner: that apology isn't weakness. It's the beginning of responsibility." She turned slightly toward Marcus. "Dr. Ellington taught me that respect isn't about titles, it's about choices. Every day we choose to serve. We choose what kind of world we build." Applause erupted, scattered at first, then swelling until it filled the hall. Marcus waited for it to fade before speaking again. "Forgiveness," he said, "isn't about erasing the past. It's about refusing to repeat it." After the event, as the crowd dispersed, reporters swarmed. Questions spilled from every corner, flashes blinding. "Dr. Ellington, how does it feel to work beside the person who wronged you?" one asked. Marcus met the gaze of the reporter. "I work beside people who are willing to grow. That's all that matters." When they finally stepped outside, Sophie exhaled shakily. "I thought they'd boo," she admitted. They clapped because truth resonates louder than guilt. Marcus said, the following day, clips from the forum dominated headlines. "Grace takes flight. From prejudice to partnership." Editorials praised NorthSky's transparency, while other companies rushed to announce similar initiatives. Within weeks, AeroVantage reported a surge in contracts for ethics consulting, but success had its shadow. An anonymous article began circulating online, accusing Marcus of leveraging victimhood for personal gain. Old photos resurfaced, quotes twisted. Naomi stormed into his office one afternoon, phone in hand. "They're trying to paint you as opportunistic," she said. "We can shut this down fast." Marcus read the piece quietly. It was laced with bitterness, but written cleverly enough to wound. He put the phone down. "No rebuttals," he said. Naomi frowned. "You're just going to let them attack you. People will always resist what exposes them," he said calmly. "If I fight it, I prove their point. If I keep working, I redefine it." That night, he sat in his study, lights dim, the city humming outside. He thought about how every movement met resistance, how equality wasn't a destination, but a journey with endless turbulence. Still, something deep in him refused to yield. The next morning, a letter arrived by courier, handwritten, signed in pen, from one who used to serve coffee above the clouds. It was from an older retired flight attendant named Helen Brooks. She wrote, "When I started in this industry in 1972, we were told to smile, serve, and never speak up. I've watched your story unfold, and I finally see what I never had the courage to demand: respect. You gave a generation of silent workers a voice. Don't let noise drown it." Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. For the first time since the flight, he felt something close to pride, not in himself, but in the ripple that one act of restraint had created. Elsewhere that evening, Sophie sat on her balcony with a cup of tea, scrolling through supportive messages from other attendants. She smiled faintly at one comment. "You made me believe change is possible without hate." She texted Tara, "Thank you for believing I could learn." Tara replied instantly, "Thank you for proving it." As night deepened, Marcus stood by his window again. The sky was crowded with departing planes, their lights tracing slow constellations across the dark. Each one carried strangers who would never know his name, and that anonymity felt perfect. He didn't need fame, just faith that something had shifted. In that silence, he whispered the same phrase that had followed him since the beginning. It was never about water. It was always about worth. Winter returned to New York like a long-held breath finally released. Streets shimmered with frost, and the wind that swept through the avenues carried both the thrill of progress and the sting of resistance. Inside Aero Vantage headquarters, Marcus's days grew heavier. Meetings, interviews, partnership requests. His name had become a symbol larger than the man himself. But symbols, he knew, came with shadows. One gray morning, Naomi entered his office, her expression tense. "We have a problem," she said, placing a file on his desk. "A whistleblower from NorthSky claims the Compass Initiative is just PR, that nothing's really changed inside their management. They're accusing you of letting the airline use your face while continuing business as usual." Marcus leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. "Is there any truth to it? Some departments drag their feet on implementing training," Naomi admitted, "and a few executives resent the scrutiny. They're trying to spin it as you being complicit." He exhaled slowly. "Of course they are." She hesitated. "Daniel Pierce wants to meet. Today. He says it's urgent." The meeting took place in Daniel's office overlooking the East River. The view was serene, a deception of stillness above chaos. Daniel's tone was weary. "Marcus, I'm under pressure from the board. They think this entire thing is becoming political. Some sponsors are threatening to pull funding." Marcus met his eyes. "So, you're considering abandoning it?" Daniel rubbed his temple. "Not abandoning. Scaling down. Scaling down human dignity." Marcus's voice was calm but carried weight. "That's what this looks like from where I stand." Daniel sighed. "You know I support what you're doing, but I answer to shareholders. They're nervous. Then remind them nervous systems don't grow, they only react." Silence stretched between them, taut as wire. Daniel finally said, "You've changed this company, Marcus, but change costs. I just need time to keep the walls from collapsing." Marcus stood. "Walls only fall when they're built on denial. I won't help you patch them up." He left without another word. That night, he sat alone in his penthouse, lights dim, laptop screen glowing faint blue. He scrolled through hundreds of emails from employees, some hopeful, some fearful. Among them was one from Sophie. "If they try to bury this program, I'll speak up. You're not alone in this." He smiled faintly. The words carried strength he hadn't known she possessed months ago. He replied simply, "We move forward, no matter how rough the air." Days later, the storm broke publicly. A news outlet leaked internal memos showing NorthSky executives debating whether to tone down social responsibility messaging. The article ignited outrage. Protesters gathered outside NorthSky's headquarters again, but this time they weren't just shouting slogans. They carried signs quoting Marcus's own words, Dignity is the foundation of safety. The company scrambled to respond. Daniel called Marcus repeatedly, but he ignored the first few calls. On the fourth, he answered. "Marcus, it's chaos." Daniel said, "Investors are panicking. They think you're behind the leak." Marcus's tone stayed level. "You know me better than that." "I do," Daniel said, "but perception doesn't." "That's the problem," Marcus replied. "Perception matters more to them than principle." Later that week, NorthSky held an emergency board meeting. Marcus was invited, but not expected. He arrived anyway. The room buzzed with anxiety as he walked in, his presence cutting through the murmurs. One executive spoke sharply. "Dr. Ellington, with all due respect, this program has cost us more than it's gained. The public relations crisis is bleeding us dry." Marcus turned to face them all. "Then maybe what you're bleeding out is everything false. Let it go." The room fell silent. His calmness disarmed them more than anger ever could. Another voice, older and trembling slightly, spoke up. It was Janet Fields, the HR director. "He's right," she said. "I've been with this airline for 20 years. For the first time, people are actually talking about behavior instead of schedules. We can't undo that." Daniel watched her, then looked at Marcus. "If we keep this alive, we'll need someone to lead it full time, someone the staff will follow, not fear." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "I already have a company to run. I wasn't talking about you," Daniel said quietly. "I was talking about Sophie Lang." The room reacted instantly. Whispers, disbelief, protest. Daniel raised a hand. "She's become a symbol, too. A different kind proof that redemption can work." Marcus studied Daniel for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If that's what you believe, give her the chance." After the meeting, Marcus found Sophie waiting in the hallway, summoned without her knowing why. "They want you to lead Compass," he said simply. Her mouth fell open. "Me after everything." "Because of everything," he interrupted gently. "You've lived the lesson. That's what people trust." She shook her head, voice cracking. "I'm not you, Dr. Ellington. I can't speak like you do. You don't need to. Just tell the truth. The rest will follow." When she finally accepted, there was fear in her eyes, but beneath it resolve. The same resolve he'd once carried when walking into rooms that doubted him. The next morning, the news spread NorthSky names former flight attendant to lead ethics division. The headline sparked mixed reactions, admiration and backlash, faith and fury. But amid the noise, one message began trending: "Rise again." Weeks rolled forward. Sophie grew into her role with quiet confidence. She worked closely with Tara, designing new training modules. Employees who once avoided her now sought her guidance. Even those skeptical of her transformation couldn't deny the authenticity in her voice. Marcus watched from the sidelines, proud but cautious. He knew success could crumble under pressure. One evening, he visited the training center unannounced. He found Sophie in a small classroom, speaking to a group of new attendants. "Respect isn't a rule," she was saying. "It's awareness. You don't need to know everyone's story to treat them with care. You just need to believe they have one." The trainees listened, silent and intent. Marcus stood in the doorway unseen, a quiet smile touching his face. When she finished, he clapped softly. The class turned in surprise. Sophie froze. "Good words," he said. "I couldn't have said them better." She blushed, laughter breaking through her nerves. I might have borrowed your phrasing once or twice. That's how legacy works, he replied. As they walked out together, night settled over the tarmac outside. Planes gleamed under floodlights, each one a promise of movement. "Do you ever get tired?" she asked suddenly. "Every day," he said with a chuckle. "But purpose doesn't let me sleep too long." Sophie looked out at the planes, her reflection merging with his in the glass. "I used to think leadership was about control. Now I think it's about surrender. To what he asked, to the truth," she said softly. "Even when it hurts." He nodded. "Then you're already leading." That night, as Marcus drove home through the quiet streets, he realized the movement no longer belonged to him alone. It had taken root in policies, in people, in hearts. And, though storms still brewed above the clouds, for the first time, he felt certain the flight toward justice would not be grounded again. By early spring, the Compass Initiative had become the blueprint for corporate ethics across multiple airlines. What began as a single confrontation had turned into a nationwide conversation. Marcus should have felt victorious, but something in him remained restless. Success, he'd learned, didn't feel like a parade. It felt like silence after a storm, uncertain, uneasy, and waiting for the next gust of wind. He sat in his office one morning, sunlight spilling across stacks of reports. The city below pulsed with its usual rhythm, but his focus kept drifting to the framed letter from Helen Brooks that hung on the wall. "Don't let noise drown it." Those words grounded him more than any award or contract. Naomi entered, holding a tablet. "I thought you should see this," she said, handing it over. On the screen was a headline, "NorthSky Ethics Program Under Investigation Claims of Financial Mismanagement." Marcus frowned. "That's impossible. We set up transparent audits." Naomi scrolled. "Apparently, someone diverted training funds to unrelated corporate expenses. They're implying it happened under Sophie's division." He stared at the screen, disbelief tightening in his chest. "That doesn't make sense. Sophie keeps detailed records. Someone's framing her." Naomi nodded grimly. "We both know how industries protect their own. If this sticks, everything we've built collapses. Within hours, the story spread. Comment sections turned venomous. Critics who had once praised the Compass Initiative now called it a vanity project built on hypocrisy. Social media boiled with divided opinions. Some blamed NorthSky's leadership. Others turned on Marcus himself. He called Sophie immediately. Her voice trembled on the other end. "Dr. Ellington, I swear to you I didn't touch a cent of that money. They approved every expense. I know," he said firmly. "Don't panic. We'll prove it." But the panic was already spreading. Daniel Pierce avoided his calls. NorthSky's legal team issued a carefully worded statement about internal review. Even Janet Fields, once his ally, was silent. By the end of the week, Sophie was placed on administrative leave. Reporters hounded her apartment. Claire fielded calls while she hid inside, blinds drawn, terrified. When Marcus arrived that evening, the building lobby was swarmed with cameras. He walked through them wordlessly, shielding Sophie's name from their shouted accusations. Inside the small apartment, she sat on the couch, eyes red, papers scattered across the table, receipts, statements, records she'd printed herself. "They're saying I approved vendor payments that never went through Compass," she whispered. "But look, every one of these has signatures from finance. They're trying to make me the scapegoat." Marcus picked up the documents, scanning them. He recognized the pattern instantly: classic internal sabotage. Someone wanted to bury Compass without dirtying their own hands. "We'll find who did this," he said, "but you need to stay calm." She looked up at him, her voice cracking. "Do you think people can really change, Dr. Ellington? Because right now, it feels like the world just waits for you to fall." He crouched beside her. "People change, systems resist. Don't confuse the two." The next morning, he stormed into Daniel's office. "Who authorized Sophie's suspension?" he demanded. Daniel's tone was weary, defensive. "The board did. They're trying to control the damage." "The damage isn't Sophie, it's your cowardice," Marcus shot back. Daniel's patience snapped. "You think you can fix everything with speeches and virtue. This is business, Marcus, and business bleeds when ideals become headlines." Marcus took a step closer, his voice low and steady. "If you think decency hurts profits, maybe you're in the wrong business." He walked out before Daniel could reply. Over the next week, Marcus launched his own quiet investigation. He enlisted Naomi, Tara, and even Janet Fields, who had resigned 2 days earlier in protest. They traced expense reports, cross-referenced vendor accounts, and uncovered a hidden memo signed by Miles Drayton, NorthSky's former legal counsel. It revealed that funds had been redirected to cover unrelated executive bonuses, then disguised as training costs. When Naomi found the final link, she looked at Marcus with disbelief. "Miles signed off on all of it. He's the one who buried the evidence in Sophie's name." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then it's time the truth takes the stand." He contacted a trusted journalist, someone known for integrity rather than spectacle. That night, an exposé broke across major outlets. Internal leaks reveal fraud behind NorthSky investigation Compass funds misused by senior counsel. The story included documents, timestamps, and audio clips Naomi had unearthed. The world turned on its axis again. Within 24 hours, NorthSky's headquarters was surrounded by reporters. Miles Drayton resigned under pressure, citing health reasons. The board reinstated Sophie with an official apology. Daniel called Marcus privately. His voice was subdued. "You've won again. This was never about winning," Marcus said. "It was about not losing what mattered." That evening, he visited Sophie's apartment again. She opened the door with tears in her eyes but a faint smile. "They cleared my name," she said, voice trembling with relief. "They did," Marcus replied, smiling softly. "But you cleared your own by staying true." She gestured toward the table where her laptop sat open. "I recorded a message for the Compass team. Can I show you?" He nodded. She pressed play. Her voice, steady and full of quiet fire, filled the room. "When storms come, they don't ask if you're ready. They ask if you'll stand." We stood, and for that, I'm proud not just of what we built, but of who we became. When it ended, Marcus looked at her with admiration. "That's leadership." "Sophie, no," she said softly. "That's what you taught me." The next day, during a live press briefing, Sophie addressed the public for the first time since the scandal. Cameras flashed, but she didn't flinch. "Integrity doesn't protect you from being tested," she said. "It protects you from failing the test." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was reverent, a sound not of victory, but of belief, of afterward. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus stood near the stage watching her speak with reporters. For the first time since the incident months ago, he felt the weight lift. This was no longer his story, it was theirs. Later that night, Naomi joined him at a small cafe overlooking the Hudson. "You realize," she said with a smile, "you've just helped turn an airline into a classroom." Marcus chuckled softly. "If people learn something from turbulence, it's worth the flight." Naomi's expression softened. "And what did you learn?" He looked out at the river, where city lights shimmered like scattered hope. That leadership isn't about control or even courage. It's about endurance holding steady when the world tilts. A long pause hung between them, filled only by the sound of rain tapping on glass. Then Naomi raised her cup. To endurance. Marcus lifted his in return. To dignity. They clinked their cups gently. The sound, small but resonant, a reminder that even the quietest moments could carry the weight of transformation. Spring turned to early summer, and the world, it seemed, had finally caught its breath. The Compass Initiative was no longer just an airline program, it had grown into a coalition. Universities, public offices, and corporations reached out to adapt its model of accountability and empathy. For the first time, NorthSky Airlines became a symbol not of scandal, but of reform. Marcus sat in a quiet corner of a cafe near Central Park, reading through a thick stack of proposals. The city outside hummed with sunlight, children's laughter, and the smell of roasted nuts from a vendor's cart. But beneath the surface calm, his thoughts stirred restlessly. He'd spent the last few months watching others take the spotlight, Sophie leading workshops, Tara training new attendants, Naomi negotiating with organizations around the country. He'd become, strangely, a background figure in his own creation. And though that was what he'd wanted, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unfinished lingered in the air. Naomi arrived with her usual energy, a tablet tucked under her arm. "You've seen the numbers?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "Compass enrollment tripled last quarter. The FAA is reviewing our training as a national model." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's good news. People are learning." She leaned forward. "There's more. The United Nations wants to feature Compass at their Global Ethics Summit next month in Geneva. They want you to deliver the keynote." He blinked, surprised. "Geneva. They want you," Naomi said firmly. "Not a committee, not a PR rep. You." He hesitated. "I've spent enough time talking. Maybe it's time others speak." She smiled knowingly. "Humility is noble, Marcus, but sometimes leadership demands visibility. The world listens better when it recognizes the voice of experience." He looked down at his coffee, the steam fading into soft spirals. "If I do this, I don't want it to be about forgiveness anymore. Forgiveness without change is just theater." Naomi nodded, "Then make it about legacy." The following weeks blurred into preparation interviews, travel plans, rehearsals. Yet, amid the bustle, something unexpected happened. Sophie called one afternoon, her tone lighter than he'd ever heard it. "Dr. Ellington," she said, "I have some news. I've been nominated for the International Aviation Leadership Award." Marcus chuckled. "I can't think of anyone who's earned it more." She hesitated before adding, "I'd like you to present it to me, if you'll come." He paused, touched. "I wouldn't miss it." The award ceremony was held in Seattle, in the same city where the Compass flight had once landed in chaos. Now, banners lined the walls reading "From Air to Equity." Sophie took the stage to roaring applause, her name announced alongside her story of redemption and resolve. Marcus watched from the audience, pride swelling quietly in his chest. When she approached the podium, she began softly. I used to think mistakes defined us, but they don't. It's what we do after them that writes our story. She glanced at Marcus, eyes glimmering. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who chose to grow instead of hate. The room erupted in applause. Marcus walked up, presenting the award with a handshake that lingered an unspoken acknowledgement of everything they'd endured. Cameras flashed. But for once, the noise didn't feel invasive. It felt deserved. Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed, Sophie found him standing by the windows overlooking the glittering skyline. You were right, she said quietly. Change doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. He smiled. And sometimes it transforms us too. She tilted her head. You sound tired. He laughed softly. Maybe I am. You spend your life fighting storms, and one day you wake up realizing peace takes its own kind of strength. As they talked, Tara joined them, waving from across the room. They want a photo of all of us together, she called out. Marcus smiled, following them back to the stage. Under the bright lights, the three of them stood side by side, once strangers bound by a single moment of injustice, now partners in something far greater. After the event, he returned to his hotel, exhausted but content. The city lights glowed like constellations reflected on water. He poured himself a glass of scotch and stepped onto the balcony, the cool night air carrying the scent of rain. For the first time in months, he allowed himself stillness, but peace rarely lasts unbroken. His phone buzzed a message from Daniel Pierce. Need to speak urgently. NorthSky audit uncovered something, not financial. Marcus frowned, replying quickly, Call me. The call came moments later. Daniel's voice was tight. Marcus. During a routine internal check, our IT team found a set of encrypted emails from last year. Someone inside attempted to delete them, but they were backed up automatically. The contents referenced targeting you surveillance, leaks, defamation tactics. It wasn't random sabotage. It was orchestrated. Marcus's voice hardened. By whom Daniel hesitated. The file headers traced back to Vanguard Communications, a consulting firm under our PR contract. Marcus froze. Vanguard. Yes, Daniel said quietly, and according to the emails, they were directed by someone connected to our board. The name struck him like thunder. Miles Drayton. Marcus murmured. Exactly. But there's more. Daniel continued. The thread implies he wasn't acting alone. There's mention of external partners' political connections who wanted Compass discredited because it was exposing systemic discrimination within contracting networks. Marcus's silence stretched long. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, streaking the glass like ink. Daniel's voice dropped. If we go public with this, it could destroy careers. Maybe even yours. Are you sure you want to pursue it? Marcus looked out into the night, his reflection merging with the storm. Truth doesn't ask permission. Daniel, it demands presence. After the call, he sat back, heart pounding. The ghost of Chase Holloway's scandal from years ago, the shadow of the old Vanguard Solutions echoed faintly in his mind. He realized this wasn't just an airline issue anymore. It was a thread tied to something larger, older, and more dangerous than anyone had known. The next morning, he met Naomi and Sophie in the Aero Vantage boardroom. The rain still clung to the windows. We've uncovered proof that the attacks against Compass weren't isolated, he told them. Vanguard Communications likely a front for the same people behind older corporate sabotage cases is involved. Naomi's eyes widened. You mean the same Vanguard that appeared in the Holloway incident years ago? Marcus nodded grimly. The very same. Sophie frowned. So, this was never about us. It was about silencing reform before it reached the top. Exactly, Marcus said. We exposed something they wanted buried. Naomi looked at him with quiet resolve. Then we don't back down. He met her gaze. No. We take it higher. That afternoon, he called a press conference not to defend himself, but to expose the truth. Standing before a sea of microphones, he spoke calmly, each word deliberate. For months, we believed our fight was about fairness within one company. But the deeper we looked, the more we found a web of corporate interest willing to weaponize silence against accountability. Today, that silence ends. The revelation sent shockwaves through the industry. Stock markets dipped, rival firms scrambled for statements, but for Marcus, it wasn't about chaos, it was about cleansing. That night, when he returned home, Naomi texted him only 2 words. They're scared, he replied simply. Good. Fear makes way for change. The storm outside raged well into the night, but Marcus didn't mind. Storms, he knew now, were how skies learned to clear themselves. The day after Marcus's press conference, New York seemed to vibrate with new energy. Headlines screamed across every major outlet. Names were dropped, connections exposed, and boardrooms across the country scrambled to distance themselves from the tangled web of Vanguard communications. It was no longer just a scandal. It was a reckoning. Inside Aero Vantage headquarters, the atmosphere was electric and uneasy at once. Some employees looked at Marcus with admiration, others with quiet fear. Naomi worked the phones nonstop, fielding calls from reporters, government agencies, and advocacy groups. Sophie arrived early that morning, her face pale but determined. They're already calling this the Ellington disclosure, she said. Marcus glanced up from his desk. I didn't do it for fame. I did it so truth couldn't be buried under comfort. Naomi stepped in, waving her phone. The Department of Transportation is opening an investigation into Vanguard. They're asking for our cooperation. Marcus nodded. We'll give them everything. No half-truths, no edits. If transparency brought us here, transparency will carry us through. For the next several days, his office became a command center. Files were sorted, statements reviewed, and old contracts examined under a microscope. Tara helped collect testimony from employees, and Janet Fields, who had returned to assist, unofficially compiled historical HR data to show systemic manipulation within corporate PR structures. It was exhausting work, but there was unity in it, a sense that the storm they'd all feared had become the very wind pushing them forward. Meanwhile, outside their glass tower, the world debated endlessly. Some hailed Marcus as a reformer, others painted him as a disruptor, dismantling the quiet order of business politics. Through it all, he kept his composure. He'd learned long ago that storms were loudest right before they cleared. Late one evening, after the others had left, Marcus sat alone in the dim office. The city glowed beneath him, thousands of windows, each holding its own story of hope or fatigue. He thought back to that first flight months ago, when he'd simply asked for water. How strange, he mused, that a single act of disrespect could ripple so far, pulling truth from shadows that had hidden for decades. The next morning, he received a call from Daniel Pierce. Marcus, Daniel said quietly, I wanted you to hear this from me first. The NorthSky Board just voted to terminate all contracts with Vanguard and issue a public apology. We're naming the Compass Initiative as our official standard of conduct moving forward." Marcus allowed himself a small, tired smile. "That's a good start. There's more." Daniel continued. "The FAA wants you to serve on an independent advisory panel for national aviation ethics. They're calling it the Skybridge Council. You'd have oversight across multiple airlines." Marcus paused. Surprised? "That's quite a responsibility. You've already been doing the work unofficially," Daniel said. "Now it just has a title." He thanked him, then hung up, exhaling slowly. For the first time, he realized the fight he'd thought was ending was only transforming, growing larger, stretching across boundaries he hadn't imagined. That evening, Naomi and Sophie joined him at his apartment to celebrate quietly. The living room glowed warm under soft lamps, and for a few rare hours, laughter replaced tension. Tara stopped by with a small box wrapped in blue paper. "From the crew," she said, handing it to Marcus. Inside was a polished silver pin shaped like a wing. On its underside was engraved a single phrase, "Human first. Always." Marcus turned it over in his hand, speechless. "You have no idea how much this means." "Oh, I think we do," Sophie said, smiling. Later. As the night stretched long and conversation drifted, Sophie stood by the window, watching planes move silently across the horizon. "You ever wonder," she said softly, "how something so small like water could lead to all this?" Marcus joined her, gazing at the sky. "It wasn't the water," he said. "It was the reflection. The moment we see ourselves in the other person, everything changes." She nodded. "I used to think justice was loud. Now I think it's quiet. It happens in rooms where no one's clapping. Justice whispers." Marcus agreed, but its echo lasts generations. The following week, Marcus flew to Geneva to deliver the keynote Naomi had arranged. The conference hall buzzed with international delegates, cameras, and anticipation. When he walked to the podium, applause filled the vast room. He waited for it to fade, then began in his measured, gentle voice. "Change," he said, "doesn't begin with power. It begins with presence. Too often, we wait for laws or leaders to fix what begins in the heart. But systems don't learn empathy. People do." He spoke of the flight, of Sophie's growth, of the transformation that followed. "There's a difference between equality and dignity." He continued, "Equality is giving everyone a seat. Dignity is ensuring no one is made to question whether they belong in it." The crowd rose in standing ovation. Cameras caught his calm smile, the silver wing pin glinting under the lights. After the speech, reporters swarmed him, but he slipped away quietly through a side door. Outside, the evening air in Geneva was cool, carrying the scent of spring blossoms and rain. He walked alone along the lake, his thoughts gentle and heavy all at once. He thought about his father, the man who once stood in that diner doorway years ago, humiliated but silent. Marcus wished he could see this moment, not out of pride, but peace. To show him that the son who learned to stay quiet had finally learned when to speak. When he returned to New York days later, the city welcomed him not with fanfare, but with familiarity. The world had already moved on to new headlines, new debates, yet that felt right. Real change didn't need to trend, it needed to endure. A month later, NorthSky unveiled a new memorial installation in its headquarters lobby, a wall of etched glass panels inscribed with passenger testimonials, quotes from the Compass Initiative, and a central dedication plaque reading "To every voice once ignored." Sophie stood beside Marcus during the unveiling, her expression solemn. "Do you think people will remember?" she asked. He looked at the wall, the way light refracted through the glass like the shimmer of wings. "Not every name, but they'll remember the feeling, the reminder that kindness is the simplest form of revolution." Naomi joined them, holding a folded newspaper. "You made the front page again," she said teasingly. He smiled. "Then let's make sure it's for the last time." They laughed, the sound blending with the quiet hum of conversation in the lobby. For once, there was no tension, no fear, only reflection. As the evening waned, Marcus stepped outside. The air was warm, the sunset deep gold. Planes ascended into the sky, one after another, their contrails cutting pale lines across the horizon. He watched them until they faded, each one carrying passengers who would never know that the comfort of their journey was born from conflict, courage, and compassion. He adjusted the pin on his lapel, whispering the words engraved upon it, "Human first, always." And for the first time since it all began, he felt truly at peace, not because the world had changed completely, but because it had started to try. The sky, wide and endless above him, no longer felt like something to conquer. It felt like something to share. The story of Dr. Marcus Ellington reminds us that dignity is not something we earn through titles or power. It's something we all deserve simply by being human. His calm defiance in the face of humiliation shows that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks in steady tones and patient truth. For older generations, this lesson echoes deeply. Many have seen the world change but still feel the sting of being overlooked, dismissed, or silenced. Marcus's journey teaches us that standing for what's right doesn't always mean confrontation. It can mean clarity, compassion, and endurance. It reminds us that progress is rarely loud, but always possible when someone dares to stay grounded in their values. Whether in business, family, or daily life, respect begins with awareness, and awareness, when practiced consistently, becomes legacy. Like Marcus, we can all turn pain into purpose, and in doing so, leave behind something larger than ourselves, a world just a little kinder, a little fairer, and a little more human. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about the power of kindness and courage, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Every comment, every share, every like helps bring more light to stories that remind us what humanity truly means. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so together we can keep telling the stories that make hearts feel, minds open, and voices rise. Your support keeps these stories alive.